Welcome to the DingeCast. We are driven by a passion for discovery and the belief that history should be uncovered. Our mission is to reveal the hidden realities of the past to bring history into the light. Welcome to the DingeCast.
All right, and welcome to the after show, the Dinge after show, the DingeCast. It is because there's something important about what is old and dingy and sometimes dusty. And so, Mr. Behind the Scenes, I want to read from an Indigenous, it's called powwows.com. It says, now more than ever, before in the modern age, Native Americans are reinvigorating beliefs that have permeated their diverse cultures for centuries, according to Britannica. Efforts to pass down the old ways to new generations are constantly underway. This is primarily done through the oral tradition and by inviting tribal members to participate in various ceremonies and gatherings. There is no one holy book or set of particular laws that all tribes follow, or even for the individuals. Unlike most popular faith systems around the globe, Native beliefs were not intrinsically tied to politics or economies either. Now, see, if we take a look, and unfortunately, a lot of people do tie their belief systems to politics, their spiritual, religious belief systems to politics, which is extremely often divisive because you know what the truth is? It's nice to have a guidebook, right? In other words, if you're going to go on a trip, you need a map or you need a GPS. Well, the spiritual people, the indigenous people of the previous generations, pass down their beliefs through oral, through dance, through art, through different kinds of drumming, music, every kind of way. But they didn't have a written tradition. But you see, when you have your tradition permeating every aspect of your culture, the written tradition is not necessary. If you're living it, you're living and breathing it. I'd just love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's like like a lot of the drumming I've read in some of the cultures it mimics thunder. It's like to honor that, and so it's if it's so ingrained in your culture, you're like, who needs the reminder? That's pretty interesting. Like what are things that we have today that just seems like such common knowledge, it doesn't even need to be said or written down, and then 10 years, 20 years later, it's like it's lost.
Well, I mean, look at our culture. How much of our lives revolve around, and this is insane. If when I say this, you're going to say, social media. I don't do social media per se. I have a couple of places where I put information about me, and for the most part, I just sort of do what I do, like with you. I do a lot of telecommunications, and I do a lot of vlogging and podcasting. And for me, I write a lot of books, yes, but my main source of communication is communication, right? And my communication is absolutely, all the verbal communication I do is totally in line with what I write. So if you hear me or if you read me, you're going to get the same thing, essentially. And to me, there is spirituality in every aspect of what we do. Now, it's either a vertical up or a horizontal down, right down to the ground, to the flat earth. So, if we're doing what we believe, then we don't necessarily need to have it constantly reinforced with social media, with television, movies. Our music is so weird because it really doesn't say anything. It talks about drug experiences and terrible relationships. But the indigenous people had a form of music that did transmit certain traditions, and I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, on the social side, it's interesting because I mean, we're all to some degree, I'm sure, guilty of it. I don't go on most apps anymore, and even every once in a while, it's like an instinctual it's like a muscle memory. You pull out your phone. I'm waiting in line. Let me just thumb through some timeline. I'm like, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? I could be doing something else. I just downloaded a chess app because I was like, they're playing chess, not checkers. Cool. Who actually plays chess? Are you good at,
I
yeah,
love chess.
insane. And I was like, you know what? I should just, if I'm gonna be on my phone for a few minutes, let me play a round of chess against somebody and keep myself challenged on that. That's better than whatever I was gonna look at. But the other side is, I mean, we know how social media preys on your emotions and vulnerabilities. We don't have to get into that. But the other side is that it is a distraction. Like you said, the things in culture that are it's permeating. With social, depending on what side of the algorithm you're on, you're gonna see a lot of the same stuff in your feed. If you're on Instagram, maybe you see, all these people going on these awesome vacations, and they got a nice car and a watch, and everybody's life is better than yours. And you get bombarded of that one thing from all these angles. And suddenly you feel like that's what the whole world's doing. That's what everything's all about. I better go chase that so I can be like them. That the funnel that social media, the lens that you look at the world through is limited, and you can't see the potential of what else you could be applying yourself to. And I feel
Hey,
like getting off of social media for the most part really helps to open that up for you of like when I'm not being influenced by all of this, what do I want? Uh that's not really,
well,
it's different from your point, but it shows how
no,
those things
it's
influence you
totally to my
more than you
point.
realize. And it's you're limiting your choices because you're only selecting from what's being top of mind because you're being overloaded with it every time you pull your phone out.
Yes, and the other thing that's super important to realize, and everybody does, but they put it off to the side, is that everybody on social media is only showing you what they want you to see.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's something that's captured, like, in real time, somebody gets pulled over and there's a conflict between that person and the police, that's real time. Okay, and that becomes news often. But the rest of it, I would say that's probably a very small percentage of what it is that people consume, is the actual event.
But I get what you're saying, and that's the other thing too is that you can what for the platforms I am still on, I've really influenced what shows up in my feed. When I was on X, I subscribed to a lot of pages I thought were funny, but I realized there was an angle in the humor that has the rage part that it's like some of these are funny, some of them it's like the God, I can't believe people are so stupid and blah, blah, blah. And then you
Mm,
want to go tell somebody, and you're like, that's a it's a bad brand to get involved in. So if I do go on social, I'm seeing, historical stuff, obviously. That's I follow a lot of pages like that, but it's like gardening tips, fine art, music. Here's a guy who spends his page is just how to help you use AI for more things. So it's like at least if I'm in a feed, it's generally better content, but even in that universe, there's still a lot of garbage. So you can't really win no
yeah.
matter what you do.
Yep. Yes, and one of my main points here is that with the indigenous people, and what they go back to, as you were saying before we started this portion of our show, that the concept of religion as an organized thing in their world was very different than it is in our world. There wasn't any particular dogma, and the traditions were really what were the basis of their belief system. So the traditions were passed on, and the perpetuation. And here's the other thing about traditions: bad traditions tend to get put down and replaced with better traditions. So if you take a look objectively at what it is that the indigenous tribes kept, as opposed to things that didn't work or things that made no sense. See, we don't necessarily get rid of things that don't work or don't make sense. As a matter of fact, some people are so stupid that they do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. And this is why people can get taken advantage of through the social media because, somebody sent me $10,000. Really? Wow. Let me check. Let me click on that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know.
No, I know. My joke is always like the ones that prey on guys, where it's like, here's like this attractive woman and she's flirting with you, and it's like you let your guard down. You're like, oh, I never get DMs like this, but it's my lucky day. And
Yeah.
all I need to do is send her some money, and it's like, oh, yep, you don't get it. Um, but yeah, but before the call, I mean, you were talking about just how it's the indigenous way is almost like a lost way of life for a lot of us, and I feel like there would be a real benefit to getting back in touch with that. I don't know if you want to kind of elaborate on what your point was there.
Yeah, my point was that the concept of religion as an organized thing is not a part of most traditions, believe it or not. Uh, and so what we have to do is integrate into it. But religion describes a division between the supernatural, which is ruled by one or multiple deities. Now, this is what they're talking about in the indigenous world. Native American spirituality does not separate two concepts in any real way. So they combine the idea of life and their belief system about whoever it is. Now, of course, the indigenous people all believed in a creator, the creator, the whatever you want to call it, God.
Hmm.
And so they had this, the great father, what I'm saying? I mean, I've heard indigenous people talk about the great father. And so they recognized an origin, they recognized a reason for things. See, the average person doesn't actually do that much thinking about the cause and effect relationship between things. But again, you were talking about the idea that, they went back to nature, they worked around a certain relationship with the actual real world. They had to keep that thing in balance, otherwise they wouldn't exist. We don't do that. We
Hmm.
just don't.
It's funny. I think Cahokia was one of the examples where they strayed from that, right? Because there's always in their legends that warning of keeping the balance, or else the earth will strike back or do whatever to balance it back out. That if you can't live in harmony, a cataclysm or something is going to come and wipe you out to correct course. And in Cahokia, one of the theories was it became such a big community, they just couldn't keep up with the lumber needs, for construction, for fires, and they essentially decimated all the forests around them, and it became too much of a distance to travel to get wood, and that led to part of their collapse. So it's like the tales do act out in real time. It's like, the legend says to respect the forest and this and that, and don't take more than it provides. They did that, and then their
Yep.
community failed. I mean, allegedly, I don't. Nobody knows it for sure, um, but it's definitely an interesting way of looking at it. That they have all those warnings for a reason, and I can't remember if it's Sky Woman or Spider Woman, which legend it was, that there is like a panspermia aspect to the native
Right.
idea that,
Right.
call it what you want, but essentially like a comet or a meteorite, you know, came to Earth, and that had, corn, beans, squash, whatever, pumpkins, whatever other, that's where those foods came from. Or again, this I'm really paraphrasing here, but the origin stories of their history is a really interesting topic, though.
So again, let's just take a look at the spirituality aspect of, let's say, any group of indigenous people. They all derived from the same kind of belief system that the spiritual or supernatural world is the same thing as the real world. Now, this is so amazing if you think about it, because they saw the supernatural in the natural. Now, the average person, you see these lawn signs. Forgive me for going off on this, but we believe that love is love, and we believe the science. That is about how deep. It's as deep as a bottle cap. That whole idea, because they don't really believe it. They just have a slogan that they repeat to themselves. But if you're living in congruency with the real world, the the spiritual and the natural, the supernatural and the natural, are constantly becoming more self-evident, as opposed to you receding back into the recesses of your comfy armchair or your couch or whatever, and allowing the boob tube to make your reason and your thought processes for you. Just saying.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name. I was just reading a story. Can't remember what country. It will say it was Australia. I don't remember that. In the 1800s, some traveler was talking to one of the natives, and the natives, basically it came up, like, well, do you hear, listen to the trees and this and that, and the guy's like, I don't know what you mean, and the native was stunned, and they talked for a while, and he's like, you can hear trees, don't you hear it? And the guy's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, and the native guy started crying because he was so upset. He's like, I cannot believe that there are people that can't hear mother nature or whatever. Like, and it's not just like hearing the trees swaying in the breeze. Like, he's saying they communicate. If you listen, you will literally hear what it is telling you. So
What
your
a
whole
great
thing of,
point.
the spiritual versus,
Yeah.
the physical world. Um, Gosh, I mean, I don't even know where to start on this one, but it is true that, let's look at it like this. We base everything on our five senses. Everything that is real because I can touch it, see it, smell it, this and that, taste it. Um, Take your senses away, you're still here. You're still here. You could have all five senses taken away. You're still here. So then what is life, right? Uh, you could look at it on that aspect of, the walls of consciousness to reality, and where that there is a little bit of a blurred line going from one end to the other. You can't even always trust your vision. Did you ever do the test with the with your rods and cones? You have like something like a red stick, and you have them in your vision, just out of your field of vision, and while it's coming back into your field of vision, for a second it's green before it flips back to red, because your eyes, the cones, the colors flip when it's in your peripheral.
Yeah.
And that's just one random example, but just you can't even trust your senses for your sense of reality sometimes. So um to me,
That's very
that
true.
really
Yeah.
plays into what you're saying, that there is definitely something deeper here. And our modern way of living has largely written that off, or just hasn't given us a need to look through that window anymore.
So, but again, we've been, rather than being integrated into a relationship with with the real world, let's say, we've been disintegrated. We've been drawn into artificial worlds, artificial thinking, superimposed over our natural consciousness. And, the idea that the Native Americans, and maybe this is why uh, religious types hated the indigenous people early on, because they were very much the people that suppressed the indigenous people were very much, um, what do you call it? Verse and chapter. They needed real clear lines to be drawn for what they could believe and not believe. But see, the native people, they believed that the two concepts of spirituality, which is natural and supernatural, were the same thing. And every supposed division is completely permeable, and people can access every spiritual thing just as easily as they can wade in a river or feel the sun on their skin. I mean, can you imagine having that understanding, right? That you have the ability to experience deeper and deeper insights, higher knowing, just like you have the ability to go to the store and buy groceries. I mean, it's that deep, okay? But there's another sense here. There also exists a general sense of connection and oneness among a particular tribe of Native American people, the Lakota. They have a term called Mitakuve Ovesin, meaning that all are related, or all beings are relative of each other. This explains the belief that spirit exists in everything, or that everything is connected in some way. So think about that, is that we think of each other as different tribes, right? We think of each other as having, even our neighbors. Do I know who my neighbors are? Yeah, I kind of know their first names. But they're not really that interested in me. I found that out when I moved to where I live now, 25 years ago. Everybody lives their own little separate lives because they don't feel that they're really that connected in any way, shape, or form, other than, hey, how you doing? Getting their mail or whatever. So anyway, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, to your point, it goes beyond humans, though. I mean, we're talking about animals as well. It's like I always kind of use the joke, well, not a joke, but like I obviously love to eat meat. I don't necessarily want to be the one to cut the chicken's head off, before I prepare dinner. It's nice having somebody else do that for you. And it's like people feel different, it's like, all right, we're having some chicken marsala tonight, blah, blah. Feel different if it's like we're eating Henry tonight. We're gonna eat, remember that chicken Henry we had? We're eating Henry tonight. And you're like, oh, I feel different about that now. Um,
Yeah.
but for the natives, I mean, it's like everybody is connected. You're even if it's like you catch a rabbit and that's your dinner, your paths crossed. That rabbit's life and your life intertwined, and you keep going because of that rabbit. And in their world, that was important enough to acknowledge. It wasn't just food is food, go on. You catch big game, you're like, hey, like that kill, that catch, we are good now. That's one more month. Like, extend the clock. So everything was crucial to survival. So it makes sense that you would honor it and think of it in that way. And that's just on a primitive level. Beyond that, just like I like to watch my cats. I look at frogs out back. You're like something's tick there. There's gears turning in their heads, right? So there is a sense of consciousness in everything. Even ants. Ants are like little armies, right? They all communicate and talk. Birds are out there singing all the time. So everything is just as much alive as we are. I know that we're kind of unique in our ability to ask why other things do acting instinctively, but still there is a thought process. There is got to be some kind of I don't know. Is there like an inner dialogue in animals, right? Are they just going around with no thoughts, or is it like, oh, should I go on that blade of grass? Should I go on that rock? Like, is there is there some thinking going on?
Yeah.
So that to me,
Well, I
whatever
mean,
you believe, that's a spirit, you
yeah,
know?
I have, my family has a Doberman. We have a Doberman living here with us, and this dog is super smart. If you tell him to go to his bed, he walks over to his bed. And then when he's asleep, he has dreams, and you can hear
Yeah,
him making
yeah.
noise, and he's barking at something. So there's activity going on in that mind. And again, the indigenous people talked about their spirit guides. Come on. I mean, each animal had a representative value. You know what I'm saying? It represented some kind of spiritual lesson that they needed to learn. And when they would go into their sweat lodges and they would, avail themselves to these guiding spirits, hopefully they will get a meaningful lesson or something that they needed to know, whether to do or not do. And so the idea that we are integrated as opposed to disintegrated is so profound. There's something else too that is interesting, and that is that they didn't have, it says no concept of unattainability or inaccessibility seems to exist in many Native American belief systems. Everything exists in relation to everything else. Again, we are so scattered. You heard the word scatterbrained. We're so scattered. We think that things are disconnected. And because of that, we don't see how we fit into the bigger picture. We are all integrated, whether we realize it or not. I mean, you probably heard the expression butterfly effect, right?
Hmm.
Well, the butterfly effect means that, if you do something, and I just take it down to the personal level, if you do something or you fail to do something, that has an effect somewhere else. You don't even think about it, but it does. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, tying back to an earlier point, because we were kind of talking about the how the spiritual side gets connected to political powers, things like that, and for their society, that wasn't really the case. But in the last episode, I mentioned the Iroquois Confederacy, and it's an important it's noteworthy enough to bring up here because early settlers did interact with them. I mean, New York State definitely acknowledges their existence and all. We learned basically settlers learned a lot about native culture through these like the more powerful groups, right? So it's like we see tribes, we trade, we do this and that, but we really got to understand their governance when we saw how, again, this is like covers like five different states, and these guys would travel in to all meet in this one spot. They kept the fire going. It's like the sacred fire. That was the meeting spot. And to understand their form of governance. So the point is, I'm making a long story longer here. There is a belief that the founding fathers and others actually adapted a lot of the Iroquois Confederacy's systems of governance and incorporated that into how the United States operates. They just the way that they, systems of checks and balances, things like that we have different branches. It's not just, well, he's in charge, so he says yes. It's like they had kind of like a Congress and ways that there was different branches that certain matters would go through. Like, oh, this is this type of dispute. Well, that goes through him, and then it goes to the council for the final vote. So it was really interesting to learn how advanced their form of governance was. And it's almost like through generations of trial and error, they arrived at this system that worked really well, probably because they learned from previous mistakes. Oh, well, every time we end up in a conflict like this, this is generally the consensus for how to deal with it, and it never is a favorable outcome. And they learned how to make a system to ensure there was peace, right? It's not like natives all got along with each other. I mean, before we got here, there was warring tribes everywhere. I mean, uh, gosh, you look at parts of the Pacific, what am I saying? The Southwest, and some of the native settlements are, you have to walk what, like a half a mile and then walk along the edge of a cliff another 300, 500 feet. And then there's a whole village built there. Like, I'm not talking about this isn't Mesa Verde. It's another one. I don't even know if it has a name officially, but how dangerous was life that that's where you had to live to make sure that nobody could find you and attack you. There's awful stories of that area. Just somewhere in the Southwest. I'm sorry, I don't remember which state. That basically there became a point of, drought, there's a food insecurity, and basically tribes and maybe even families started turning on each other to the point of, like cannibalism. I mean, it became an ugly scene.
Mm,
So you find these crazy tucked away, settlements, and because that's how you sleep at night. How do you sleep at night worrying if somebody's gonna jump in through your window?
true.
So just saying that they had a lot of their own territorial issues, and the Iroquois were one who seemed to have found a solution for that, to get such a large part of the Northeast to live in basically harmony. I mean, there were still wars, don't get me wrong. There were battles between tribes, but that really did create a lot of peacetime for them, for just simple trade and commerce, and just living separately and not messing with each other. So it's just interesting.
Well, but one thing that they did have in common was this core belief that the natural and the supernatural were the same thing. And, I believe that they probably all prayed to the same star father, whatever you want to call it, to the great father in the sky, whatever. And so that they had, just like all people, I mean, the war that's going on between Russia and Ukraine, they're actually cousins, those people. And but
Really
their
sad.
political beliefs are what divide them. And their land beliefs are what divide them. And I think this is going to be true throughout, the rest of human history. That is it possible for all of us to get to that point where we all say, okay, let's just all get along? I don't think that's ever actually going to happen, because we don't have similar enough belief systems that unite us in this idea that heaven and earth and supernatural and natural are basically extensions of each other. We compartmentalize each other into different categories, And then we look at each other as if we were aliens and not brothers and sisters. This is the reason for division. And if you think about it objectively, the idea that we could, you know, we could get along, we've heard that, but what does it actually take to make that happen? And that's the biggest question that we have. We have the question of, is there a common belief that would tie us all together? And that belief would be in the individual dignity of each human being on earth. But there's so many people that will never accept that. Just saying.
I know. I don't have a solution for world peace, but I do have some ideas, at least for some basic steps. The one thing that I look at, just looking at America, right? So, um, there are a lot of wedge issues, right? This country, there's some issues that people are just never going to agree on. You're not going to change one side's mind either way, but there's a lot of issues that everybody agrees on, and we don't really talk about those, right? Like, what do they say? It's like there's like how many are wedge issues, and then most people, if you poll America, it's not like, oh, is it this side or this side? It's pretty favorable on both sides. So why doesn't something get done about it? And this is what I would ask, or what I would love to see change. Why does Washington need these 1,000-page omnibus bills that have everything in the kitchen sink included in it? And they give Congress like, we got 48 hours to read it. We're going to vote on it on Tuesday. Um, what was Nancy Pelosi's famous quote that you'll have to pass it to find out what's in it. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
they say things like this. And
Yeah.
it's like this is an artificial problem that you created,
Yeah.
that you have you're giving them an impossibly narrow window, so nobody's gonna look at it. And then they put stuff in there that okay, well, the first one is to make sure we don't throw kids off of a cliff. And then the
Right.
second one is private funding for my cousins. What, just a stupid example, but they're like, well, I'm not going to sign this bill if you just want to give money to your cousin. And then you're like, okay, oh, well, he didn't sign it. He hates kids. He wants to throw kids off a cliff. And you're like, no,
Right.
dude, no. So
Yeah.
it's like the way that we handle legislation fell into the trap of politics for how you create leverage and this and that, and everything's about making deals to get this bill passed. So how about no? How about we don't do that? How about bills are like one page? How about we do each thing individually instead of being like either it's all or nothing. You're either signing on for these 1,000 things or we're not doing any of it. How about, and then it's like, and then like we're gonna shut down the government if we don't sign this. Come on, dude. Make one bill for the budget, make one bill for this and that, and get busy. And I think they don't do it that way because this way is better for running a campaign, for the sensationalizing aspect of it. And
Yep.
my point is the American people get held hostage because every 4 years the same issues always come back up. It gets really tiring after a while where you're like, people who are new to it are like, Did you hear the news? I'm like, yeah, that's been the same thing for the last 70 years, every 4 years. I'm glad you're I'm glad you're catching on. Um, but we get left in the dark, or we get left behind because the things that actually help people don't really get passed because it gets killed, or you get what I'm saying. That I feel
I
like
absolutely agree.
creating that middle space that says, okay, we're going to disagree politically on all this stuff, but hey, good news, America. It doesn't matter what you stand for. This is good news for all of you, and we, the government, passed it. No, we could never do that. We might accidentally give points to the other side.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
Something that frustrates me because it's so easy, but it's pulled into a system
yeah.
that you can't break them out of that routine at this point.
So RFK Jr. Is trying to get red dye taken out of our foods, which they will not allow us to ship over to Europe.
Yeah, it's banned in how many other countries, but still here. Yeah.
104, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the people who have something to lose are the loudest voices against him. And this is the problem, is that unless we can have a truly honest system based on doing what is good for other people, we will never end the problems of conflict in our social systems. We just won't. And it's really strange how it comes down to red dye number 4, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
There's a war over red dye number 4. If there's a war over red dye, which is proven to cause cancer, there's going to be a war over everything. It's a psychological, spiritual war.
And like no flavor, right? Who actually needs that red
Well,
dye?
yeah, I mean, it's like, you do really need your salmon to look super pink to make it look really attractive? Come on.
Yeah, I
Come on.
might mess up my kids, but at least the salmon's gonna look really good for my Instagram photos.
Oh,
Uh,
man.
and like so, RFK is a good example, right? Because this is kind of like the baby out with the bathwater kind
Right.
of thing that I'm going at here. Um, obviously RFK Jr. doesn't have a he's got his fans and he has people who are not very big fans of him right now, or just in general. And I feel like the people who aren't fans just you're just against everything that he's doing. Why? Why? I mean, you can hate that he killed a bear in Central, or like dumped a bear in Central. You can hate him for the insensitive comments he said about something, or even all of his
Right.
you don't have to agree with all of his policies.
Right.
But can you just admit if it wasn't RFK, if I had a cardboard cutout of somebody else, and I said that this guy banned red dye, you'd be like, oh my gosh, finally, finally. Oh, but RFK did it. Oh, uh, why the shift there? Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to like the guy. You don't have to agree with everything he does. Admit that sometimes you agree with these people and what they're doing. And that goes for anybody. Like, you can
Yeah.
hate whoever, but you can be like, you know what, man? I'll
Well,
admit, I'm glad that
listen,
you did that thing.
I'm not against social media. I don't want people to get me wrong. I think it's amazing. You know why? Because unfortunately, there are good messages. I mean, like the stuff that I watch on the feed that comes into my smartphone is interesting to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't watch it. It's like it's actually a knowledge base that I don't even have to look for. If I see something that's interesting, I'll just tap on it. I send you articles that show up in my feed, which is kind of cool. But the flip side of that is that there are millions of junk, garbage, idiotic things. And so it's low-hanging fruit for people. If they're not happy, or if they're not on a trajectory toward personal development and real spiritual, personal, economic growth, then they're going to allow that to take them out of that misery zone for a few minutes. I know that sometimes when I start looking at these shorts on YouTube and stuff, well, they're all connected. It's Joe Rogan, it's one thing or another, right? And 90 minutes later, I'm going, oh my gosh, where did that 90 minutes of my life go?
Yeah.
Right? Now, maybe I learned some things that I needed, but at the same time, the idea that people are not self-limiting, that's the big problem. Is like, okay, I've had enough of this. You might watch one video or 10, but there's a point in time to put it down and move on to doing something meaningful that's good for you. I mean, that's just the problem. The
Yeah.
problem is the power of polarization. We're talking about RFK Jr. The power of polarization. 1 minute, okay, Elon Musk, another one. 1 minute he's the darling of the climate change crowd because he's making these amazing, and they are amazing, electric vehicles. The next minute he's the enemy. It's the same with RFK Jr. 1 minute he was a heroin addict for I think 14 years. Did you know that?
I did know
He
that.
was
Yeah.
a drug addict for 14. The guy had some serious addiction issues. He overcame that. He's a poster boy for leading America to doing better things for itself. Okay.
Yeah.
But as soon as somebody says, well, he's trying to take away some of our food things that we love, they're going to polarize people against it. The stupid people are going to go, did you hear what he did? Sadly, if we don't think for ourselves, we're never going to integrate, and we're never going to see the beauty and the power of the natural and the supernatural being part of the same thing. We're just not going to see it. This is where the Native Americans, the indigenous people, have our asses kicked.
I know we're just about out of time here, but I'll just note that is our goal here, right? Like, you got Mr. Behind the Scenes to come out and show up on camera for social
Yes.
media. I'm trying to make sure that there is something positive in your timelines, right? You're watching this on social right now, probably.
Yeah.
From beneath the sands of Egypt to miles under barrier ice walls of Antarctica, truth is being revealed. Giant technological structures discovered beneath Giza's Great Pyramid, the most important archaeological discovery of all time. This research delves into the groundbreaking discovery of massive underground structures beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza, uncovering a hidden history that challenges mainstream archaeology. These deep formations, extending over 600 meters into the bedrock and connecting to structures nearly 2 kilometers below, suggest that ancient civilizations possessed engineering capabilities far beyond what has been traditionally acknowledged. The book examines the possibility that these structures predate dynastic Egypt and may be remnants of a pre-flood world, aligning with biblical and historical accounts of lost knowledge, forgotten civilizations, and advanced construction techniques. Drawing from both ancient texts and modern technology, this book explores the implications of these findings in relation to the Emerald Tablets, the Halls of Amenti, and biblical references to antediluvian civilizations such as those mentioned in Genesis and the Book of Enoch. Could these subterranean structures be remnants of a lost world that was destroyed in the Great Flood? Were they built by a civilization with knowledge passed down from divine or even fallen entities? Hidden Foundations of Ancient Civilization considers the role of the Nephilim, Watchers, and other mysterious figures from ancient traditions, as well as the possibility that these underground chambers were used for spiritual, scientific, or even interdimensional purposes. You have to read Giant Technological Structures Discovered Beneath Giza's Great Pyramid, the most important archaeological discovery of all time. Available now at www.escapeyourmindsprison.com or on Amazon Kindle.